Oh, hello there. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Hope that you're having an absolutely wonderful day. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a little bit, but I'm here to give you an album review. What album are we going to be reviewing? Brian Eno with Forever and Evermore, the 2022 release just this year. I heard about it. I figured, hey, I want to talk about it. So of course, I want to know your thoughts as well, so please leave me your thoughts on the album below before I even spill my guts on what this album, what it means to me, how it sounds to me, what I think of it. I want to hear your thoughts before I even get there. But without further ado, let's go. Forever and Ever No More is an otherworldly collection of tracks, really blissfully balanced between Eno's ambient classical works and deeply moving vocal performance. Eno's aged and oaken vocals emanate a certain gravitas to the album, a nice contrast to the often airy, sometimes distressed soundscapes. Kind of reminiscent of Brendan Perry of Dead Can Dance and Manophone and post-Manophone works from David Sylvian, of course, of which I'm very familiar, with sparse arrangements given purpose through directed speech. And the message is very clear as well, with lyrics ranging from warnings of nature's end, loss of humanity, and cosmic insignificance. And while this all may sound a little bit dour, the tracks also reveal a certain hope towards the future and self-realization and purpose within the individual themselves. Directly from Brian Eno's site, he says, "I like creating worlds. That's what I do as an artist, creating sonic worlds. Now, after quite a long absence of humans in those worlds, I have tried putting one in and seeing how they feel about the world I've made." So the question is, how does it feel to be in Eno's world? Who Gives a Thought opens with glassy sounds, lightly breathing, as Eno proclaims an eventual apocalypse. Electronic throngs ring out with sonic malaise. We Lit It In is a really nice standout track here on the album. Darla Eno actually contributes brief and breathy statements like "Sun," "You're deep," among Eno's kind of hymn to light. Wonderfully treated vocals. Echoes of colors vibrantly vibrating, and an occasional water drip makes this a really standout track on the album. Icarus or Blériot. This one's a really good one as well. Musing flight and fall, Eno questions the pride of man and advances in society with how far we've come and how far we still have to go. Ominous synths and scratchy melodies fill out the spaces here on this one, turning in on itself briefly about halfway in. A droning vocal delivery with melodies struggling to reach the surface, and a deep hum trapped in the earth is what we hear in Garden of Stars. Possibly the darkest track on the album, with Eno prophesying end of all, growing in the static cacophony that eventually just... After the very heavy Garden of Stars, Inclusion kind of acts as a tender interlude here on the album, gently sweeping with synth and string. It's also the first instrumental track on the album, nicely carrying us to the halfway point. There Were Bells is what I paraphrase as Eno Can Dance. It's probably the most emotional performance from Eno that we have on this album, with some of the best lyrics as well. You have deep bass swells and thunders rumbling beneath a seemingly peaceful atmosphere, accompanied by accordion. It's very easily a standout here on the album, and really a great centerpiece as well. The one thing I really appreciate about the next track, Sherry, is the way that Eno sings around and dances with the piano. It reminds me a little bit of Scott Walker 3, but with a little bit less rain and a little bit more existential crisis. I really enjoy his soft crooning here on this track, especially the brief but fitting doo-doos at the end. Why did I write it like that? In I'm Hardly Me, I really enjoy the auto-tune-like vocals in the beginning, as it just adds a kind of crystal-like texture to the sound, especially giving a certain kind of levity to these weighty themes that we've been talking about. And then you have electronic insects kind of buzzing and flying around the vocal delivery, kind of just like touching you. Eno returns for the second half with a vocal performance, but if I'm being honest, I'm not feeling it as much right there. These Small Noises, this is a really surprising track on the album, with very moving piano runs, choral singing, and a hymn to the work of mankind itself and the futility of it. Listening to this track feels like sitting in a church, sending up one final prayer before the world caves in around you. This track carries to me the perfect balance of hopelessness, faith, and inevitability. And Making Gardens Out of Silence is the perfect track to light a brief fireplace of sanctuary amongst the cold and depressing tones of the album, and is the second instrumental track to boot. With its use of vocal processing, elevating strings, and all the other tools at Eno's disposal, Making Gardens is the kind of track that, once the last note fades away, you're kind of left feeling a little bit empty. So those were just a couple of my brief thoughts on each of the tracks here on the album, but to get to the favorite, the favorite tracks on the album and the favorite lyrics, I got my paper pulled up right here in front of me. So my favorite tracks are Who Gives a Thought, Inclusion, There Were Bells, Making Gardens Out of Silence. I think that these are the best tracks on the album, even though the album itself I think is pretty strong regardless. My favorite lyrics is actually the opening in Who Gives a Thought. Who gives a thought about the fireflies, short lives of moving light, perform their quiet flight, the stars of starless nights? Who gives a thought to the smallest, perhaps seemingly insignificant creatures on our planet? Who gives a thought? But once they're missing, you're thinking now. I just really like the implications of it, of giving thought to these things that we marvel at. And of course, fireflies are beautiful, especially at night. Primarily at night. During the day, they're just another bug. But what happens when the fireflies are gone? Then what? And then finally, I wanted to read this quote from Eno because I found it was really important in me summing up the album and my thoughts about the album. He says, "I'm more and more convinced that our only hope of saving our planet is if we begin to have different feelings about it. Perhaps if we become re-enchanted by the amazing improbability of life. Perhaps if we suffered regret and even shame at what we've already lost. Perhaps if we felt exhilarated by the challenges we face and what might yet become possible. Briefly, we need to fall in love again. But this time with nature, with civilization, and with our hopes of the future." So that's what I kind of get to when I'm talking about the message of this album. Yes, it's very cold. It seems hopeless. It seems inevitable and doom-laden. But at the end of the day, it's about falling in love. With what? With you, with nature, with ourselves. It's just about finding love and peace again and reconnecting. Really strong album. I really enjoyed listening to it. Not every moment on it will stand out, and it is definitely an album for a quiet night in, but it's one that leaves you thinking and feeling. So please let me know what you guys think of the album below. Of course, if you enjoyed this album review, you can subscribe, you can like the video, you can follow me on Twitter. I almost forgot what I do. You can also support me. You can also support me on Patreon if you want to do that as well. I even dressed up a little bit to kind of get... Anyways, hey, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later. Bye.